Greetings everyone, and welcome to today's video. So, as many of you may know, DRG has recently gotten its new update, roughly a day or so ago from me recording this. And of course, there's new content, new weapons and stuff, but personally I am most interested in, and what's the main topic of this video today, is the Collette Wave Cooker. So, new secondary for driller. And I've been messing around with this weapon for some time, a decent amount of time, like a few hours, kind of just trying different ideas and just messing around with stuff, and just messing around with different builds and all that stuff. And as I've done so, I kind of really enjoy the weapon, so yeah, I'm going to talk about it right now, so hopefully you gain some information or something useful from this, and yeah, hope you enjoy. So yeah, I'm just going to, let's start with the basics of the weapon. So honestly, overall, out of all the secondaries, compared to, for example, the Tabora and Experimental Plasma Charger, is the most, in my personal opinion, the most easiest weapon to use. Because it's very easy to fire, because you don't have a projectile to say, like a Tabora, where you have a bullet, and Experimental Plasma Charger, you have a plasma ball. Collette Wave Cooker kind of shoots out this circular wave, and your reticle is just a giant circle, pretty much, and everything in there is going to get hit by it. And it can't penetrate, but so basically, if there's two grunts in a line, you'll hit the first grunt, but the grunt behind it will be fine. And there's a penetration thing here, so it can penetrate and cannot penetrate sometimes. So yeah, just keep that in mind. But overall, it's very effective, since usually shots that would have been very interesting to, or impossible to really effectively do because of terrain, bullet spread. If I used the EPC or the Tabora, I can do it with the Collette Wave Cooker, which is quite nice. And of course, it's a good AoE tool, like it's able to shoot quite a few targets at once. And I have managed to basically just shred some swarmers, like a pack of swarmers from teammates occasionally. Like I see Scout over there doing something, and I just spray down a few warmer packs, and they're all gone, since yeah, it's pretty good. You also hit your teammates a lot, but thankfully it doesn't do too much damage to them, so yeah, it's pretty good with that. So you're able to not damage your teammates too much. So yeah, it's a very good AoE tool just to shred down grunts, swarmers, and just like chaff very effectively. And also, it has a unique kind of on-death effect, where it kind of causes enemies to kind of like explode outward, like, you know, you heat up a bag of water and eventually the pressure inside is just going to cause a burst or whatever, you know, that kind of stuff, you know, evaporates, causes pressure to build up, then explodes. That basically what happens to bugs. So good body horror stuff if you care for that. So, which is actually quite nice, because it causes exploders and Praetorians, from what I can tell, to basically never activate either their death cloud effects, or in the exploder's case, the self-detonation effect. Like, you fire at them, they pop, and they don't explode or cause a death cloud, which is pretty useful, because those are usually the most dangerous parts of a exploder Praetorian. So helping that not happen is very nice, since especially this weapon's pretty good with its large AoE and a very generous projectile speed. Allows you to kind of just take down swarmers quite quickly despite your speed. Like, you're able to track them very well. So exploders are kind of mute with it. Like, they're kind of like, you don't really have to deal with the explosion effect if you're just on top of them, so it's quite nice. Now onto the downsides, because of course there's some weapon. Of course, along with all weapons, this thing has downsides, so let's get into them. Base damage is not great. It's not great at all, really. 7 damage and 7 rate of fire seems alright. Like, it's not bad for like a base weapon stat. Like, you increase it, for example, with this and some other stuff, no doubt with an overclock. And just, yeah, again, I don't have all the overclocks, so I'm more basing this off like the base modifications. So I view overclocks as more the extra stuff, so I kind of view gear modifications as like the main integral thing to your weapon. So basing my ideas off that, and if something else happens, like an overclock is very good, I'm happy to change his opinion on stuff, so on his weapons, so yeah. But weapon damage isn't great. It's good against swarmers, it's good against grunts, it's good against web spitters. As the spitters are okay. Grunts are fine, but once you start getting to grunt guards, it starts to have trouble. Well, once you start getting to Praetorians, Oppressors, and Dreadnoughts, you don't do any damage at all. Pretty much. Like, you can't really do much damage at all. Like, compared to, like, the EPC, you know, 20 damage per hit, and Sabata, 14 damage per hit. It's like, this thing, like, 7 damage and 7 rate of fire is pretty good, but it also doesn't really affect, like, weak points don't seem to really matter that much with this weapon. In fact, I'm pretty sure it doesn't even, I think this counts more of an AoE weapon, so weak points on enemies are really not really a factor. So, like, you can't really take advantage of that, so it's always 7 damage and 7 rate of fire, which isn't great, but of course you can always increase that, but yeah, it really struggles with that. And heat generation. This is also kind of a big problem, since you fire on a Praetorian, for example, and you try and take it down, your gun overheats, because it overheats very fast. So this thing overheats quite fast. Like, it just overheats in like quite a short amount of time, and if you're focusing on like a bigger target, you basically have to constantly like pace your shots so that you don't overheat it immediately, because it's like it overheats quite fast and can interrupt you quite often. Like, I think personally it's one of the more annoying cases of heat generation, because I think the plasma carbine, for example, and EPC are a lot better overall in terms of like heat generation. I guess it's more because this weapon is more about area effects, while those things are like more explosive and like more damaging. Like, the plasma carbine for Scout is like very high damaging. EPC for Drawer, again, is pretty decent, like it's pretty strong. So yeah, it's just kind of like heat will get in the way sometimes, and try like it'll stop you from getting some pretty good stuff in. Like, it'll stop you from taking down a swarm pack, or stop you right at the worst time when you take down grunt pack. It's like, it stops you at the worst times, in my opinion, and I have been stopped from taking down quite a few things because it just overheated at the very last second. So, and this is pretty much the only weapon I seem to have much of a problem with in terms of that. Like, the other two are mostly fine. This weapon tends to have the most problem, even with heat reducing modifications and stuff. And of course, given it has a high rate of fire, ammo is drained fast. Like, 300 magazine size, so technically that's the total ammo, but magazine size is what they call it, so, but this is essentially total ammo. And rate of fire 7, like, you can burn through ammo surprisingly quickly with this. Like, I have gone through ammo quite fast on this weapon, so it's like I had to constantly keep, like, unless I had the unless I had the ammo modification for this weapon, I usually had trouble like keeping it, you know, from being rid of all of its ammo. Like, it's very ammo hungry, and it's like, given each shot tends to not do much damage, it feels like you're getting somewhere, but then suddenly you forget, oh yeah, I wasted like 10% of that entire ammo of my weapon on a Praetorian that I didn't even kill. Because, like, again, low damage, high fire rate weapons, and it's like, yeah, it's just, you go for your ammo fast, and often you don't do much with that ammo because it's such a low, you know, overall damage per shot. So yeah, it's definitely a problem. So alright, let's go on to some gear modifications. And of course we'll go from left to right, and I'll just give my personal opinions on each, and yeah, we'll just start from the top. So, +2 damage for each shot is not bad. You can't help, but the thing is, like, you may think +2 damage is like, oh, that's amazing, but when you think about it, like, that's 14 extra damage per second, and that isn't much when you really think about it. Especially when you can have to consider that you have to constantly consider modifications in comparison to what else is on the tier. For example, you could have +2 damage, or you could have 100 extra shots, which is a third extra, which is a pretty good amount. Now the thing is with damage, it's like, if you're going for something real fast or trying to take down a single target real fast, damage is good, but the thing is, a lot of missions in this game, I would consider more of a marathon than a sprint. You want to try to keep going as long as possible. And again, it's like, would you rather have more ammo overall to survive an extra wave? Or would you want to have more damage in order to kill that Glyphid Warden slightly faster, or that Glyphid Praetorian slightly faster, and probably still not kill him anyways because his damage isn't the greatest in the world? You know, that kind of stuff. So, yeah. So again, it's like, I feel like this is kind of lackluster in comparison to ammo, which because allows you to stay in the fight a lot longer, and also allows you to get more from resupplies, because you get 50% of your ammo from each resupply you take. So you get, instead of 150, you get 200, which is a noticeable difference. So you're able to keep in the fight a lot longer and be more ammo efficient when it comes to nitro, so that's always nice. And again, damage just kind of falls behind a little bit when it comes to shot whiff bonus. So this is a unique stat for this weapon, and basically increases how big your shot is, which I guess makes sense because shot whiff, so pretty obvious there. But this basically increases how big your shot is and how many enemies you can hit at once with each shot. This is very good because it's very nice against swarmers, grunts, and it really helps with like acid spitters, web spitters, Mactera, because it allows you to track them better. Because you know, like, acid spitters, web spitters can be a little bit interesting sometimes when you get behind cover and stuff. So having a little bit extra area of effect for each shot can help you actually hit them a little bit. And of course, Mactera and exploders are fast, and they are a pain in the ass to hit sometimes. So having a bit of a wider shot can help quite nicely, being able to hit them. And we'll come back to this a little bit later because there's some other modifications that have a unique effect or unique relationship with it. Alright. So, here too, we'll start from left to right. Heatsink. Reduction in heat generation is always good for this weapon. You generate a lot of heat, so reducing it by a bit can be quite nice. Just a good overall mod for any energy weapon in game, usually, so pretty good overall, very useful. Fire rate. This kind of comes into problem again, where just because fire rate is faster doesn't mean the gun is better. That's kind of my opinion on the whole thing. It's like, again, it's like you're firing bullets faster, but the problem is you're firing bullets faster. You know, you're wasting ammo more, and often the bullets don't do much more damage. So technically, you could be wasting bullets in some weird way, because you know you can cause some effects, but also waste ammo faster. So it's like ammo economy is a bit of a thing in this game. So yeah. The rate of fire is a little bit double-edged sword in some ways, where you just waste sometimes too much ammo for sometimes mundane reasons, like you accidentally overkill a grunt swarmer, which, given how many times you have to fight him in a single mission sometimes, can waste like 50 shots possibly if you overshot like once or twice, or you know, it was 3 times when you're fighting a swarm of them. Especially since this gun's pretty good against swarmers and exploders anyways, you kind of don't want to waste shots on it already. Like, what it's good against is lightly armored targets, and it's pretty good against that already, and against anything tougher, it's pretty bad against, honestly, most of the time, with pure damage. So it's like, it's already good against everything in terms of taking them down fast. Like, and you're not going to get much better against taking down stuff that can't take down fast, so it's like, you're not going to get much of a benefit from rate of fire. Now, of course, here comes the other part of the heating dynamic. Cooling rate and overheat duration. So, cooling rate is always good, you know, just getting the heat down as fast as possible when you're not firing. Always nice. And overheat duration is always good in case you accidentally overheat when you're focusing on the Dreadnought in front of you or your Praetorian in front of you, and you accidentally leave your gun on for too long. Overheats. Getting back into the fight earlier is pretty good, so. Racing overall, either of these are pretty good. Like, I personally think this is a little bit lackluster, but either of these heat-based modifications, it's more about personal taste than anything else. Like, either of these are pretty good like you'll get used to each of these. So I guess the best thing I can say is find out what works for you and just go from there and just try and go with it. So yeah, okay. Year 3, we're starting to get some of the more unique effects now. Densification Ray. Basically on hit, you cost up to slow down quite a bit, so basically if you use this, you become essentially a support piece. So basically this gun becomes a mini slow grenade that Scout has. You know, the slow grenades that Scout throws out, that slows down every single breach, or everything in the area where you throw it. Well, why you don't get the damage bonus from that, from the grenades, you get the slowdown from it, so you can basically have a pocket slowdown grenade for your weapon, which is quite nice. And also it's pretty good because you're able to move this from side to side, like you're able to basically just shoot from side to side and really get some good value out of it, because you can basically slow down an entire swarm pretty easily, and it can help your team out by quite a bit, because you know, it's like if you slow a Praetorian down or a Dreadnought down or a couple grunts down, that'll help your team out a lot, and it'll allow you to actually get some value in terms of fighting against bulky targets, like again, Dreadnoughts, Oppressors, Praetorians, because instead of doing very little damage and not much else, you can at least slow it down so the Scout or your Gunner can get a better view at the weak points of the enemy or the less armor bits of the enemy, and just take them down faster because it's slower, can't react as fast, and you can't turn as fast, so Scout and Gunner can better flank it and all that stuff and just go from there. So this allows you to basically become a support piece. Very nice, works well. Here comes a little bit more of a unique thing. Causing them to heat or cool burning or frozen targets further and radiate the temperature to surrounding enemies. So, temperature amplifier. This basically causes enemies to, when they're on fire, stay on fire, and when they're frozen, stay frozen, and kind of radiate the temperature out in a very small area. I'll be honest, I haven't seen much use out of it. Like, I have used a few builds with this, and I switched this out for densification ray. I have not noticed this effect much. It may have caused a small effect I just haven't noticed yet, and that's very possible. But personally, I have not seen any real value from this. Again, I may have just missed it, because like this gun is very weird, where it's like sometimes you just can't exactly tell what's going on sometimes, which is not the greatest ever, which is why I want a firing range or some form of equivalent in this game where it's like you can test weapons out. It's like, okay, so I know this is happening, so I know this is causing an explosion, this has done X amount of damage and all that stuff. I just wish I was in the game, since then I'll be able to understand, okay, so I now know temperature amplifier is causing this effect, and I know that for a fact. But given how this game works and how dynamic the combat is sometimes, it's kind of hard to exactly tell, okay, it's doing X and this being this effective, because yeah, for all I know, it could be effective in some areas, just absolutely terrible in others, and different combat situations. But overall, I have not seen much use to this, but from what it tells me from the description and from what I personally enjoy about the weapon, I think it's perfectly fine. And maybe if they buff it in the future a little bit more and maybe clear out, like, you know, explain exactly what it does a little better, I say go for it. Like, both of these are very good support effects. Basically gives the Collette Wave Cooker an actual effect besides raw damage, which is pretty good, and allows you to be more of a support piece, which is great since damage isn't really this gun's thing. So turning into a support piece is not bad. All right, now of course, given this gun has a heat-based reload kind of like system almost, where it doesn't reload, it depends on the heat generation and drawing straight from the max ammo supply, or you know, the current ammo supply you have, but you don't need to worry about magazines and stuff like that. Instead of pressing R to reload, you press R, and you can, if you have either of these two modifications, if you have the white ones, when you press R, it increases your shot size by a decent amount, pretty decent amount, but increases your heat per shot when you have it active. And if you press R with power supply overdrive, you shrink down the area of your shot, but dramatically increase the fire rate. And of course, if you can press R again after activating it, it'll immediately go back. So it's turn on, turn off thing, so it's very easy to use. Now, I feel like these are both very good in their own ways. Power supply is pretty good. Like if you want to focus something down, for example, say an acid spitter or a Magterra, and it's being particularly like it being annoying, and it's like very annoying. It's like it isn't in the range of your cryo cannon or flamethrower or sludge pump or anything, or you know, like lead spitter or exploder. If you want to focus it down real effectively and just get it over with and just take it down and move on to another target, or get out of the area if you have to retreat or something, it's gonna be very nice to just take you down one thing and retreating. Of course, it's not gonna be very effective against heavier, bulkier targets, but against smaller targets with no armor, not much health, it's gonna really help in just taking someone down and then moving on to another target, which is pretty good. Of course, it goes through ammo a lot faster, which you have to take account of, but for focusing someone down in like a situation where you need to take someone down, it's pretty good. And white ones is basically just more AoE, so this is more of a general use kind of application, I believe, because you're just able to basically just turn on white ones and basically just increase your shot to maximum size and just focus down an entire area with either slow or temperature amplifier, and get some good bonuses off of that. Of course, the heat per shot becomes pretty strong, so you probably need either heatsink or thermoelectric cooler, and you can't really go with this, which is just another strike against it, because if you're using this, you probably need to have temperature or heat generation buffs and stuff to make this weapon really effective, because again, the problem of fast heat generation really gets worse. So yeah, it's like you often just fire on something, but before you kill it, it overheats and you're stuck with a weapon that can't do anything for a second. So it's like, yeah, it's not the greatest in the world. Both of these are very effective, and of course, as said before, they actually are influenced by concave lens. So you can technically have power supply overdrive and concave lens and kind of negate the whole shrinking of your AoE with this. So instead you get roughly the same size normally, what you normally have when you have power supply active, when you have concave lens. So that can be quite nice, and of course it makes your AoE massive if you got white lens as well, so concave, so pretty good overall. It just depends on what you want exactly with your gun. So if you want, you know, white lens, you're going for AoE. If you want to focus them down power supply, you're saying, and either way, they're worth it, in my personal opinion. Alright, as with any weapon, the very bottom modifications tend to be pretty good. For example, EPC, you have Define Nightmare, Fin Containment Shield, or Plasma Burn, like very noticeable effects. And it's the same with this gun. So we'll start from left to right. Contagion Transmitter. 30% extra damage against poison and corroded targets, and Contagion Transmitter bonus, you know the actual effect. So, increases damage output, and a chance to spread a poison vapor to nearby enemies. So, I've tried this before with this build. And I tried it with this build, personally. And from my experience, it's okay. It's alright. Like, it does good. Like, the 30% extra damage on top of the 9, very solid. Very solid. You're not going to notice it that much, but against weaker targets like grunts or like Terra Spawn, Blood Spitters, Exploders, you can get some pretty good. You'll take them down fast, especially if you have this active, because you'll just get some pretty decent DPS going. And problem is, it's still not enough to really make, like, it's noticeable. Like, you're able to take down a decent amount of a Spitballer's health, you're able to take down a decent amount of Praetorian's health, you're able to take down a decent amount of health of some of the tougher stuff that you weren't able to do previously effectively. But the problem is, it's not enough to really make it worth it, and very often the rate of fire means you'll just waste all your ammo and not realize until you run out of ammo, because it's like, you're still tanky and it'll take a lot of shots, and again, it's like, it's not too much damage increase, like, not too much, like, it's like, it's not too much of a damage increase from, like, base. So unfortunately, like you may not notice you may not notice a drastic increase as you may expect from a 30%, because 30% seems big, but then you realize, oh wait, it may not be the best. So yeah. And the contagion transmitter effect, spread a poisonous vapor on nearby enemies. I have tried to use this, and from what I can tell, it basically just, when an enemy dies, they spawn a small neurotoxin cloud, the neurotoxin in the grenades Driller has, and neurotoxin that Gunner has for both his autocannon and the modification he has for his revolver, that neurotoxin, which is a very good effect. And on death, the enemy can spawn, and apparently, from what I can tell, it only has a chance to happen when they're either poisoned or corroded, and even still, if they don't, if that's not the case and that's just some weird luck chance and I just happen to observe it at the wrong time and that kind of stuff, like the poison vapor cloud isn't that big. And the thing with poison vapor is you gotta consider also, like, there's a lot better ways to spread poison. You have the neurotoxin grenade for Driller, you have, again, Gunner has some options, and it's like, again, you have to compare it with these two, which we'll get to shortly, but it's like, are you willing to have a lukewarm modification to spread poison when you have other options that can spread poison much better and use this weapon for something else that you may actually need, and it can't really be used, but like it'll fill a role that no other weapon can. So why should you use something mediocre? Like, why should you use a weapon mediocre in a mediocre way, trying to fulfill like the neurotoxin grenades role, for example? So yeah, it's like, I feel like if the poison vapor happened whenever you killed an enemy at all, I think that'd be quite fine. Then, like, okay, like, or maybe not exactly, but more of like a 50% chance whenever an enemy dies, that's fine. Like, you can get some decent value out of that. But as is, like, I feel like it's a little bit too rare and it's a little bit too small of an effect to really be worth it, which is a bit of a shame because I really love neurotoxin as a whole idea, but personally, I feel like this is not the greatest in the world. Oil Array. This is a very simple one. Enemies have a chance to explode when you kill them. Very simple, very simple. So, from what I can tell, the explosion effect is, from my experience, doesn't seem to really, it seems to be set into one number. Like, no matter what dies, either be a grunt, Praetorian, or a swarmer, it is always the same damage. As such, I believe this is really dependent on what mission you spawn in. If there's a lot of grunts, a lot of swarmers, this will do great. Like, this is a very, again, general use. You'll get value out of this modification. Like, there's no real wrong answer with this one. So, yeah, very general use, very good overall, very nice. But if you don't have a lot of swarmers or a lot of stuff to feed off of in order to get a good chain reaction going, this may be less effective. But again, having extra damage, AoE damage to take down like a few grunts and help cause a chain reaction is always nice. And being able to like scythe down a few grunts before they get to you from the explosion and the AoE of all that, and just, take out a couple of chunks of a Praetorian's health, not bad. Not bad at all. So overall, I say it is, if you're going for a general use, build for this weapon, this is a very good option. You can't go wrong with this one. You'll get the job done, you'll get value out of it, and it'll be kind of funny watching stuff explode. So, if you like that, you'll enjoy it. Now here comes the most interesting one, personally, in my opinion, out of the three of them. Exothermic Reactor. Causes quick shifts in temperatures of burning and freezing targets, triggering a temperature shock that spreads a mist of extreme heat or cold. So basically, whenever you hit a target with this mod on, when you have the mod on, if you hit a target with the weapon, it causes temperature shock. So if a target's freezing, it'll cause the temperature to go down to 0, or neutral, I guess. So it'll unfreeze them, but it causes a massive amount of damage. And it's the same with if it's burning. Basically, if it's freezing or burning, it'll basically cause a huge shift of either cold or heat, and basically just cause them to shift back into the middle and cause a big bunch of damage. And it's very strong in many ways. I tried it with both a cryo cannon build and both a flamethrower build, but I really didn't. Well, I guess I kind of did expect it because I just thought about it for a second, like, oh, wait, could this happen? And I tried it, and it turns out our good friend Sticky Fuels here and is very effective with this build, mainly because you, for example, you put some sticky flames on the floor, and then with this mod, or this modification for this weapon, you pull out the Collette Wave Cooker, and you focus down the Praetorian, and it fucking dies. It just dies. And yeah, because the thing is, like, sticky fuel heats up the target, and you do thermal shock, and it sets the temperature back down to neutral again. But the enemy's still on the sticky fuel, so it heats it back up again until it's on fire again. And another temperature shock happens. It sets it back down to neutral. Sticky fuel comes in, it's on fire. Temperature shock, and it repeats over and over again until the enemy's dead. And this is very nasty against Spitballers. Like, the freeze is very good against Spitballers because you're able to basically cancel out their attacking you, because it makes everything immobile when you freeze them and unable to really attack you at all. So this is very good if you want to try and just quickly take down stuff very fast, and which is quite nice since, again, most of the time, like, unless you're doing a freeze build, you're gonna have a little bit of trouble as Drawer to deal with, like, reliably constantly deal with big targets, because like you have C4 and you have like your grenades, like you have C4, you have your axes, like your throwable axes when you want to choose what you want for grenades, but you don't really have much single target damage, so getting that good constant damage of, okay, constant temperature shock, set fire, temperature shock, set fire, temperature shock, and like it goes well with freeze as well. Like you spray an area down with the cryo cannon, full swarm, and then you sweep the Collette Wave Cooker over the entire swarm, and a good portion of them go down because it'll take down bacteria fast. I've seen it shred grunts, like most grunt swarms just die. And yeah, just very, very effective at just clearing stuff out. So, and also the good thing is, compared to agent transmitters, that you're not relying on corroded or poison. Corroded or poison aren't the most common effects in the world, like in the game. Like the only two notable loadouts that have corroded or poison is Gunner using autocannon neurotoxin payload, and with his revolver with poison modification, and of course Drawer with sludge pump. And it's like you don't get poison that often in terms of like overall, while most, like pretty much every single class in the game has at least one way to either freeze or burn something, and very often like every class has something to burn, and I'm pretty sure a few classes have something to freeze. Like Gunner has his minigun overclock that causes stuff to set on fire, or I think that's a modification. Yeah, I think that's a modification. Like Gunner has his minigun to set stuff on fire. Scout has his cryo minelets for Zukovs. He has a cryo grenade, and he has the flame buckshot for his sawed-off shotgun. Engineer has his breach cutter, which can set stuff on fire, and you of course have cryo grenade, cryo cannon, and flamethrower for as Drawer. So it's like you're able to rely on your cool effects a lot more because it's a lot more universal, like universally used by both the environment and overall as your team. So you kind of have to rely on sludge pump if you're using your contagion transmitter, because it's like you kind of want to try and make sure you kind of you want to kind of combo with yourself at the very least, because comboing with your team is good if you have like a team of friends and just like, okay, let's do this and let's try this and go that. But sometimes if you're dealing with random people when join lobbies and stuff like that, and it's random people on the internet, usually they don't have, first off, they may not want to do that build, and second off, they may not even be able to get it because they don't have the weapons or the modifications yet, or they may not have the resources to get them, or all that stuff. So it's like usually it's best to just make sure you always combo into yourself, and it's a lot more efficient in my personal opinion, combo into fire or fire, the flamethrower or cryo cannon with the exothermic reactor, then just doing sludge pump and going with contagion transmitter. So overall, I would say my personal build I'd go with this is Nitron 2, because the ammo is always nice. Of course, because ammo, just make sure you always have ammo on hand is, it doesn't matter if you have 2+ damage. If you run out of ammo, you can't use that 2+ damage now, can you? So yeah. And of course, heating or cooling effects here are basically the ERDs are great. Personally, I kind of view heat-sinking as a lot better, just so it allows you to focus on a target more, stay Praetorian, and just burst it down faster. Densification ray is always nice. And of course, temperature amplifier is always nice, but I personally do enjoy densification ray. Since with my flamethrower build, I tend to, like, you usually don't really need this most of the time, because usually if you either have some sort of outside influence or you're yourself doing it, so it's like, you don't, like, and also if you're doing with the build, like, this doesn't really go well, because, like, since the temperature shock kind of just sets everything back to neutral temperature, this is not really useful, because it'll keep a bug on fire for a second, then temperature shock goes in, sets it back to neutral, so it's like, it's not really useful there. So yeah, I believe densification rate is pretty good. This also allows you to be a good support unit for your team, make sure everyone is not getting overwhelmed by bugs because they keep on charging them. It's very fast head to combat, so making the bugs slow down is always good. So great support piece, you know, always good stuff. Personally, I view wide lens is pretty good, and this goes well with exothermic reactor, since you can turn on wide lens and you'll get more effectiveness out of densification ray, more effectiveness out of exothermic reactor, and just generally just be a very effective support piece. This is more about support piece in terms of its weapon instead of raw damage. Like, this isn't a raw damage machine. This is more about, I'm gonna fire this into a crowd and get some other stuff out of it. So it's like, I'm gonna get the swell out of it, I'm gonna get the thermal shock out of it, and yeah, it's like damage is not really good because this is your damage. Like, this is like kind of weird paradox of this weapon. Like, it's the weakest weapon in terms of direct damage, but also the strongest in some cases. Like, this stuff can shred some targets very quickly with the power of temperature shock, while also being like the weakest if you just don't do anything with it. Like, 7 damage, 7 fire rate, again, not the best. Just keep on saying over and over again. So yeah, again, it's like, this can be a very strong support piece personally. And of course, I believe this is a very strong build overall. So yeah. And for overclocks, since I don't have them all, and also because I view this as more of like a complete build. Like, overclocks, in my opinion, are more like an extra on top. They're the cherry on top of the cake rather than anything else. So, and in the case of one I do have, I think this is perfectly fine. You can get the diffusion ray, so you can get the slowdown. Microwaves penetrate multiple enemies, so you're able to affect more targets at once, slow down more targets, timber shock more targets, you know, that stuff is always great. And more damage output, like, oh no, I guess I get, you know, it's like, I get 7 less damage per second. It's like, not much of a difference, especially since damage isn't a big deal. So it's like, this is a support piece, not a real damage machine. So yeah, and it also, since it slows down enemies on hit, you can just, instead of going for densification ray, you can do this and still get a slowdown. So it's like, again, this is a very adaptable build, and of course, play however you want. I'm not saying one way is terrible or not, but after all, I may just be not, I may in my insomniac brain and all that stuff, you know, like a sleep deprived brain, may not realize something, and if something works for you, go for it. If it works for you, perfect. I'm not stopping anyone from playing the game their own way, and I don't intend to, so play how you want. But this is my personal view of what, it's a very decent build. Like, I'm not saying it's perfect or anything, like, I'm pretty sure there's some overclocks that I didn't get, or I don't have yet, that make this a lot better, so yeah. But yeah, I feel like this is overall decent build to what I wanted to do as a support piece, and they just direct damage beast when you use flamethrower cloud grenades, or, you know, any form of temperature based weapons. So yeah. So that's all for today's video. I just want to talk about, just for fun, just talk about the stuff. So hope you enjoyed, hope you gained some speckle of usable information from my ramblings and all that stuff. And yeah, I stream on Twitch, so if you want to watch a degenerate play games and stuff, and if that's your thing on that weird website, then go ahead, it's your choice. But yeah, so I intend to slowly get more into YouTube content over time. I'm not saying when, because yeah, I've had the best experience with video editors so far, so yeah, it's been been busy and been a bit of a mess schedule wise, so not sure about this, but I just want to talk about it because I find it interesting and fun to talk about. So yeah, hope you all enjoyed, hope you have a good rest of the night, and yeah, just have fun playing the game and rock and stone, everyone. Cheers.